Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been reflecting on my time as an elected member since 2010. Although the initial years were extremely challenging, I must say the last 16 months have been the most difficult. My dad passed away last March, and that has obviously added to this burden. I continue to be amazed, however, how the political band can play on being seemingly oblivious to the many challenges of our great province. There would not be any place this is more evident than right here in the Legislative Assembly. Even given that reality, I have the greatest respect for this institution. Mr. Speaker, you are to be commended for your efforts to maintain a reasonable degree of decorum in this Assembly. I have never, nor would I ever, act intentionally to besmirch the office of the Speaker. Il me fait plaisir de présenter ma...
I am pleased to respond today to the second budget of the Gagnon government.
Second budget, when I was Finance Minister, much hype surrounded the process to arrive to a budget conclusion. We had engaged in a government renewal exercise to further comprehend the opportunities that might exist to improve the cost efficiencies and effectiveness of service delivery within this province. Much of this information was used as a basis for our discussions throughout the province. In an effort to avoid duplication, the specific details of studies that were done were also shared with this government. To that end, I am pleased to see the continuation of some of the initiatives that were part of those discussions.
I am pleased to see the continuation of some of the initiatives that were part of that discussion.
The continuous improvement program must build on past successes, and as I look for information readily available when I came to office, I was more than pleased to share with this government. Some of the more notable items that I recognize in this budget: the continuation of the downsizing of the civil service through a managed attrition program. I do not support arbitrary cuts to personnel at any level. I believe, as statistics would show, our employee levels are one of the highest per capita in the country, and we do need to strategically reorganize to ensure that the service levels are not only maintained but improved throughout this process. Elimination of future retirement allowance entitlements that are not required where the full pension plan exists. I see the implementation of the pension reform, increasing taxes on tobacco. I'm encouraged with the suggestion, however, that there needs to be an increase in enforcement in that regard because, as we know, illegal sales will arise as a result. I note the increased financial assistance to students or return of the funds that were previously taken away or a portion thereof. I support the move to an integrated pension services corporation to ensure independent and cost-effective pension administration and investment management. Having said this, I believe that MBIMC is well positioned for this increased responsibility, and I would anticipate they will be able to present a very comprehensive and competitive proposal. I support the rollback of the increased tax rate to the highest income earners, as I believe it to be an uncompetitive deterrent to those individuals to stay and work in this province. I find it interesting, however, that in last year's budget, the government indicated this was worth $30 million a year, a number that I certainly did not agree with, but this change would suggest the value was not there, as it would seem unlikely they would simply give it up to the federal government, no matter the number of photo ops or selfies they might get with Prime Minister Trudeau in return. I support the reduction in the numbers and the cost of agencies, boards, or commissions. In addition, I would suggest the activities of boards and the skill sets required to become a member of a particular board be better identified and the appropriate governance models be implemented. I remain concerned with the general concept that continued privatization of services is the answer to improved efficiencies. I am well aware of the efficiencies that can be gained through better utilization of assets, and I would categorize our employees of government as our most valuable asset. It isn't any secret that government operations and delivery of services have room to improve, and I have never had anyone tell me otherwise. The individuals that work every day throughout this province see firsthand how we can better deliver services, both economically and operationally. Unfortunately, we have a very disengaged workforce. Even though we all share the same goals for improvement, health care, improved education, improved social services, and all to be delivered in an affordable and sustainable manner. So what is the problem? Any workforce will only be as good as the leaders of that workforce. Tout main-d'œuvre est aussi bon.
Any workforce will only be as good as the leaders of that workforce.
And poor decision-making that is continually demonstrated by governments. This workforce sees little reason to improve, as government will only waste the value generated from any improvements made. Additionally, we must first understand the gap of how good we can be versus our current situation. It is only then that we can evaluate the true benefit of any outsourcing initiative. It is only then that we can identify the real targets for improvement and give our employees the chance to show us just how good they can be. We as a province will never be successful unless the workforce of currently 50,000 strong are empowered to be part of that solution. I am concerned that we've chosen not to address the unfair taxation program to First Nations. This rebate of all provincial taxes to First Nations communities is unique to New Brunswick and now growing exponentially due to newly built commercial enterprises that are in direct competition with neighbouring communities, communities that do not share such tax advantage. I see from this budget this annual revenue share has now grown to $47 million. I recall it being in the $37 million range when I left office in 2014. This is a 20% increase in 2 years. The program to address this situation was fully in place, and it would have been a direct benefit to 65% of individuals within the First Nations communities. Additionally, it directly addressed illegal gaming, illegal alcohol, and illegal tobacco activities. It is truly unfortunate to see this unfair practice between adjacent communities allowed to continue unresolved. Fairness ensures harmony amongst communities. I am concerned of the lack of foresight and commitment to a renewed economic philosophy. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business released a comprehensive survey that clearly reflects the need for government to listen to the voices that are the backbone of our economy. I fear this budget does little to allay their real concerns, most notably their absolute disagreement to an HST increase. Additionally, I see little in this budget to offset the impact on communities in the province that have suffered particularly recent economic loss. And I refer specifically to Sussex and the situation at Carrickhead. The mine closing is a loss of a minimal of $20 million a year in revenues, and then not to mention the 440 jobs that are now lost or displaced. I am concerned that in a time with declining school enrollment and less than acceptable academic results being realized, we apply the politically correct answer, and that would be to simply show a token increase in funding. Our education model needs to truly be reformed, but it will only ever be accomplished if we put the responsibilities to do so in the hands of the educators. These are the individuals. These are the individuals with a passion for results.
Those are the individuals with a passion for results.
I am concerned about this business as usual, tax and spend philosophy. That is being used by this government and is prevalent throughout this budget and all the activities leading up to it. I would suggest that all of the rhetoric will not make up for the actions that we have seen within this document and the process that we used to develop it. I am concerned about the many new initiatives that are directly related with the Liberal election platform. 11 new spending initiatives unusually positioned within the main estimates document that total over $50 million are without any real definition or clarity. They serve, however, to fulfill a portion of the many and excessive promises that were made to get elected. It's time to connect the dots between tax increases and promises made.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
I have a degree of sympathy for the Minister of Finance as he tries to make sense of his government's irresponsible spending programs that throw caution to the wind, while at the same time trying to convince the public that we must make tough choices. I believe he recognized the physical opportunities in our province when during the last election he said we have committed to produce a financially responsible election platform to reflect our province's fiscal situation. Despite this personal commitment, the Liberal government was elected on an unprecedented election spending platform comprising of an average of $300 million per year of new spending over a 6-year period, totaling approximately $2 billion. The platform was put together with a complete understanding of the province's fiscal situation, which was outlined in full detail in the pre-election fiscal and economic outlook, published by the Finance Department in June 2014. This document was put together precisely to ensure all election participants would have full knowledge of our fiscal situation and not have any excuses. He has suggested that he inherited a bad situation in terms of finances and jobs. I think he said the situation was stark. Let's compare, however, the situation he inherited in 2014 with the situation that we inherited in 2010. When we came to office, the financial report projected a year-end deficit of $820 million, trending upward, with a possible reaching as high as $1 billion by year-end. That is what we inherited from the Sean Graham Liberal government, and that is the definition of stark. It was like finances gone wild. And I remember during that campaign, it was another fully blown-out promise campaign, and I think even a second reactor to be built in Point-le-Pro got on the election list, knowing full well the situation this province was in. The financial report received by this government when they took office forecasted the deficit to be $377 million. This was an improvement of over $440 million in our structural deficit from when we started. But most importantly, it was continuously getting better. This significant improvement was achieved through a sustainable and manageable approach to controlling our expenses in every sector of what we do. Yeah. And I'm proud to have been part of it. But, Mr. Speaker, the deficit trends continued, at least for that year, to improve because the balls were in motion. This third quarter report further came in with a deficit projection of $255 million for year-end. There was a one-time tax rebate from the federal government which aided in that number. The year-end audit report actually came in at $388 million, under the budget of $391. This included a one-time adjustment of pension reform. That's not part of your structural deficit. Without this one-time adjustment, the actual deficit for 14-15 would have been $159 million. Yes, you heard me correctly, $159 million. What a starting point for a new government. The credibility of the entire year-end report was brought into serious question when the AG qualified the statements and clearly stated that she is unable to verify the accuracy of the numbers. In fact, she said, the public should be concerned. I find it a major step backwards in terms of accountability and transparency of our fiscal situation in New Brunswick. Given the disagreement with the AG surrounding the proper accounting methods to be used, we would not have taken that $229 million liability until the accounting issue had been resolved. It was, however, taken by this government at this time, since one of the key goals of this government from the onset has been to mask their irresponsible new spending initiatives. This could only be accomplished by giving the illusion that the actual deficit was worse.
This could only be accomplished by giving the illusion that the actual deficit was worse.
At $159 million would never work in their 4-year planning cycle. This also further explains why in the infamous choices document, the actual and most recent deficit results for the fiscal year 14-15 were not used. So we now have the appearance of an increase of almost $200 million in the structural deficit from where we actually were at the end of 2014-15. Yes, Minister of Finance, Minister of Strategic Review, and Premier Gallant, the situation is indeed now stark, and it is purely of your own making.
Yeah.
The allusion to mass new spending continued with this government's first budget and the creation of the $150 million contingency fund. This fictitious fund has had many names, but its sole purpose was to give the illusion the reported year-end deficit for this new 2015-16 budget was actually going down from the 14-15 deficit of $388, which, as I mentioned earlier, included the pension adjustment. It was stated by the Minister of Finance that our budget deficit is really 326, but with the addition of the 150 million slush fund, just because of the concerns about accuracy in our budget, it will be projected to be 476. That was to be included in not only this budget that they first put out, but in all future budgets to protect against underestimating deficit. This practice of contingency funds being created during a deficit situation is completely contrary to best business practices. It could easily be done in times of a surplus, but certainly not in times of a deficit. He goes on to say they would only use it if necessary. Additionally, the Minister of Finance openly stated that they had already found 150 million savings, which had been applied to this budget forecast. And the deficit goes up. Liberal math. Go figure. So the public is eased into accepting a 50% increase in our deficit from where it should and could have been. And through it all, and perhaps even more alarming, it is all this time the public have been cajoled into actually believing the deficit is going down from the previous year. We have been treated like frogs in a pot of heating water. We only understand the truth when it's too late. As Richard Seon has most recently stated, it was convenient for their messaging. I always believed this contingency fund would be mostly, if not completely, used when the final numbers came in. The updated forecast for the fiscal 2015-16, no surprise, 466 million, within 10 million of the 476 that was included as a variable contingency fund. So the public has been conditioned to accept that the deficit is actually approaching 500 million range as factual. And it has been an unavoidable situation. It has been an unavoidable situation for this government. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rien ne pourrait être.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
The situation has been self-made through irresponsible behavior and promises made during the election process. Unfortunately, this behavior, which often accompanies an election, was endorsed by the electorate. In this case, however, an electorate without all the facts. In a recent CBC panel discussion, the Minister of Strategic Review said they were elected to spend approximately $2 billion or $300 million a year over a 6-year period, and that is why they are in government and we are in opposition. Conveniently increasing the HST to pay for it, however, was never part of the original discussion. Augmenter opportunement.
Conveniently increasing the HST to pay for it, however, was never part of the original discussion.
So once again, the election has gone to the highest bidder, and we, the taxpayers of this province, are left to pay. When will we ever learn? The Minister of Strategic Review has spun his message far and wide that we have a structural deficit between 500 and 600 million that can only be fixed through tough decisions. From my explanation thus far, it must now be abundantly clear that until this government took office, none of this was true. It is only true now due to the creation of a self-made crisis from the very start of their mandate. It is only true now because this government refuses to make any tough decision that would negatively impact their political spending agenda. If it were not so, how else do you explain an increase in new taxes worth $370 million, an increase in transfer payments from the federal government of approximately $80 million, stated cuts in spending of roughly $300 million, and still have a structural deficit of $347 million? Actually, $400 million when comparing apples to apples. So as now you see conveniently, the contingency fund is on the way down. It served its purpose. The actions now being taken are only necessary to fulfill this government's political priorities. Any consideration for the people and the welfare of this province would appear to be purely secondary in nature. The only tough decisions being made are those that are directly and negatively impacting the people of this province. The
only tough decisions being made are those that are directly and negatively impacting the people of this province.
Fortunately, the political agenda of this government remains fully intact, with its host of new spending. This reality was again clearly illustrated with the release of the capital budget back in December. This was a budget of $656 million for the 2016-17 fiscal year, $50 million higher than last year, and without any supporting or detailed information. Project worth $597 million, or 90% of the budget, are simply defined as strategic or priority initiatives. Here comes Santa Claus.
Yep.
There has never been a capital budget so void of details. In previous capital budgets, including the one this government delivered in December of 2014, the projects were identified with corresponding budget estimates. Since new spending equals HST increase, we now know precisely why the list was not released. I am sure the citizens of this province would like to have had the opportunity to choose between new short-term political projects or new long-term taxes. Our request for a complete list of all new spending initiatives to be included in the choices document was dismissed outright. So I've witnessed firsthand the transformation of our methodical and steady approach to achieve a balanced budget, a process that saw a measured, real structural deficit decrease of over $440 million, a real decrease in the civil servants' positions through the attrition of over 2,000, sustainable expenditure management that was less than 1%. It was a process that saw our expense growth drop and be sustained at historic low levels. In fact, in our last 2 years in office, we were actually $200 million below budget in each year.
Here, here. Here, here.
The expense management was actually recognized in this budget speech, indicating that health expenditure growth in particular had averaged only 1.5% compared to the national average of 2.6%. The speech went on to say this was accomplished without introducing significant cuts that would negatively affect the delivery of health service in New Brunswick, and we should all be proud of that achievement, and I agree. And perhaps most important of all was the Accountability and Transparency Act, where our actions spoke so much louder than words through the passing of this legislation. We were so confident through the continuation of careful and methodical management and control of services and expenditures that we introduced legislation with an administrative penalty to all cabinet ministers of $2,500 per year if we did not reach our deficit targets reduction of $125 million per year. Now that is putting money where your mouth is, and I am proud to work with individuals that were able and willing to do just that. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this Act, along with all other reporting and accountability requirements, was completely repealed last March. Instead, we have seen a deliberate and calculated process of any number will do and anything will and can be said to justify the ultimate goal. In this case, it was raise the HST to mass new spending initiatives. I must commend, however, the minister responsible for this debacle in his tireless efforts to present his information in such a way as to ensure all of these extensive efforts would point to a simple solution of increasing the HST. Even the Minister of Social Development in May of 2015 recognized and stated, raising the HST would be the lazy way to fix our finances. Unfortunately, even with the HST increases, our finances are far from fixed, and our deficit is actually worse than when they started. How could this possibly happen? The strategic review process has been a rehash of known ideas presented in a format designed to create fear and acceptance of this government's tax and spend philosophy. We did not have any plans to raise the HST to balance the budget by 2017. All we had to do was keep our mouths shut during the 2014 election promise and not promise hundreds of millions of dollars of new spending initiatives. And I'm proud to say, even though we're sitting here, we can stand tall and say we did it because we recognize the economic reality of our province. We did this with only $117 million of new spending compared to $2 billion. A 2% increase will provide $250 to $300 million of additional revenue. Their new spending commitments is in the order of $300 million a year. Is it any coincidence the increase in HST equals the annual increase in new spending? Or was it the strategic plan from the very beginning? It appears the only strategy in strategic review was to mask this reality. Accountability and transparency must be more than words. It is something that is earned and demonstrated daily by visible action, measured results, and credible reporting. Given the rapid and methodical removal of any published fact-based indicators of performance and the continual spin of misleading information, accountability, transparency, and accuracy are clearly not a priority for this government. In fact, to do so would be a serious impediment to their strategy. On December 17th, the government introduced the Regulatory Accountability and Reporting Act. The details of this act have little to do with the subject matter the title might suggest. Its impact on the average headline reader would likely give the impression it is a replacement for the real act that was repealed early in the year. This was likely the hope, but nothing could be further from the truth. Its stated objective is to reduce bureaucratic red tape for maritime businesses, and the key outcomes of the work to date is the creation of the Office of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness. This is simply bureaucratic language for more committees and regulation without any defined outcomes or measurements of performance. The overall improvement in red tape reduction during our years in government was from a rating of C- to B and improved every year, as reported by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. The team delivering this result was completely disbanded when this government came to office and the key leader dismissed. Of course, we must not forget the continual barrage of timely communications designed to give the impression of success or to deflect from a current negative issue for the government. Often experienced reporters are hired directly into the Premier's office to be key leaders in communicating the government strategy. This not only provides a career opportunity for an individual, but also, more importantly, brings an instant knowledge of the news cycle, its demands, timelines, and content requirements. This can lead to strategically timed government communication releases that can easily and quickly be copied and pasted. The news revelation the strategic review process had been a sham from the very beginning and was only being conducted to justify the HST increase. When this came to light, there was a sudden barrage of alternate news items. And so it goes. The increase in the HST will mask a new spending. The reduced value of the Canadian dollar and the rise in the U.S. economy will aid exports, particularly in the forestry sector, and hopefully will assist in attracting new investments to our province. The deficit has been reset, $300 million higher, will appear to be dropping, and success will be declared. In fact, we are likely to continue to read headlines that state the deficit is better than budget, without any accompanying details of the undefendable increase in the deficit in the first place. Large sums of money will be spent on highways we do not need, creating short-term and unsustainable employment opportunities, all based on an artificial tax-funded economy. This is not a path to success, but I am sure it will be declared and perceived as one by this government, at least until after the next election. Unfortunately, traditional governing practices of tax and spend will never provide a sustainable economic fix. Our individual and collective ingenuity is seriously overshadowed by the never-ending political games. In the legislature, questions are never answered, and there isn't any obligation to do so. After all, it is question period, not answer period. In opposition, we can say one thing, and the government can say something totally different. Unfortunately, there's rarely any independent analysis of the facts. As a citizen of this province, I do not take any particular pleasure to stand here today and clearly state that had we continued with the improved expenditure management while at the same time not making the excessive election promises, which we did not make these promises, and with an $8 billion increase in federal transfer payments and the revenues this government has received, I would be now projecting a balanced budget or within $50 million of doing so. And we were so sure of it, we legislated that. And Mr. Speaker, this would have been accomplished without an HST increase. We didn't need it then, and we would not have needed it now. I have described in detail the actual process and the extensive effort that this government has used to achieve its political goals. It would seem abundantly evident that accountability and transparency of actual performance is not even a consideration for this government, especially when they work so hard to do the exact opposite. The everyday New Brunswicker must now realize that the only thing sincerely on the table during the past 18 months was a 2% increase in the HST. Those well-meaning people who gave their precious time and their sincere suggestions to this government must feel a genuine sense of betrayal. The Gallant government's infamous new spending was never put on the table for discussion. The Premier's actions have put us in a predicament that might be more stark than he realizes. Richard Saillant has said this government has missed an opportunity. I believe this government missed an opportunity to stop overspending and an opportunity to balance our books. I feel that we need an independent process consisting of financially accredited individuals who can assess the reality of our fiscal situation and do so outside of the realm of political influence. I am prepared to subject anything that I am saying to such scrutiny. Premier, will you do the same? The solution is clearly before us, but the political path to get there has and continues to be the real obstacle to our collective success, and that is politics. Perhaps what is most ironic is the title of the budget document itself, Foundation for Our Future. A future based on misleading information, half-truths and deception will never hold. At what point does the truth matter and we stand or fall based on our convictions to do what is right and just? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here.